All right, welcome to the video tutorial on how to use the Bumper Band's AI trading tools. These have been in development for years and years now and finally are released. The newest update is a AI version, machine learning, that learns from price action, and I'm really proud of it. Been, like I said, a long time in the making, and so many thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of work have gone into this. So I'm going to jump right in. First off, the first thing I'm going to say is this chart obviously looks crazy incredible. For those of you who are new or just kind of looking at this and getting your mind blown with the high net trade total percent profit, that is a little bit exaggerated because I'm currently, this chart is showing a percent equity of accounts. So I'll show you what that means. I'm trading an order size of 92% of equity. So that means it's looking at the initial capital of $10,000, and every trade it trades 92% of what has either been won or lost. So if the previous trade was a win, it incorporates the winning capital into the new trade size. If it's a loss, it is a smaller trade size. So that is why it looks so crazy. And also the commission, I will say, is at 0.06, which is very reasonable if you're using an exchange like Blowfin or something like that. Their exchange commission is right around there. So that should be actually fairly realistic. 90, this 92% of equity, it's actually how I trade my accounts. But I will say over time, the losses do mean more and hurt more if you're trading like this. So I recommend, this is for another video, and I have another video on this, talking about how to position size, or at least none of this is financial advice, but kind of how I choose to position size and protect myself against losses and actually take money home, which is why we are all here trading. So I'm actually going to put this back on because we're going to do some back testing, and the back test results look just way, 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 way too crazy. Phenomenal, because Bitcoin did so well in the past. I'm going to put this on a just dollar amount instead of percent of equity. So we'll let it do that. But while it's doing that, I'm going to jump into this tool. So this is the Bumper Band's AI Max, and I'm specifically right now looking at the 30 AI Max. There will be other versions of this released. All of them will be, used for different kind of things. But this tool does work generally really, really well across time frames and across assets. Right now it's looking at Bitcoin on the index chart, but you can trade this chart or change this chart to whatever you want. We'll look at Bybit's perpetual contract and kind of go from there. While it's looking at that, we're going to kind of talk about these sections here, and I'm going to talk about how I would use these. Let me actually really fast here. Yeah. So again, this is just trying to change the chart a little bit. Still basically the same results. Total profit loss are a little bit worse. The index chart is definitely, it's where I build my tools on. It's what I use to build my tools, and so the results are really great there. And actually, I do use it to trade and trigger exchanges, though that comes with its own drawbacks and all that kind of stuff. But I do find it pretty great to trigger my trades. Okay, sorry, I was getting into it, and then I got distracted here a little bit. Let's first look at this AI as part of the tool, the indicator. Right now it's disabled, so no matter what I put in here, it won't matter. What this specific section does is when I change time frames, it allows me to dial in the indicator a little bit more to that time frame. And actually, to do this a little bit better, I'm going to create a new layout and just put the tool on. Let's see here. I'm just going to put the max version on this one right here, and let it load there real fast. And while it's doing that, I'm going to change it to a 1 hour time frame, and we'll kind of look at the results here of what happens. And I might put on the skeleton key as well, just to get a little bit of a general idea. Okay, so you can see on the 1 hour time frame, the bands have adapted pretty well to the price movement, but let's kind of really, we'll know for sure by doing this. I'm gonna go ahead and say enter on support band, exit on resistance. So the way I do this is I just put it equal to 1, and I'll say enter on the support flag, exit on the resistance flag. Now right now there's no support or resistance flags enabled, so I have to go into the signal flag and turn those on. So right now with nothing down here enabled, anytime that the price action closes under or at the band, it enters a trade, and anytime it closes above the resistance band, it exits the trade, because right now there's nothing filtering any of the flags out except for closing price. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Right now closing price is literally closes under, it gives you, I'll hide this so you can kind of see it, gives you an entry flag, closes above, gives you I say entry flag, it's a support flag. You can use it for longing, shorting, whatever you want to do. But yeah, so that's kind of generally the idea here. And it's decent results. I mean, you can see that it had some really good gains here at first, and then it's kind of chopped sideways here a little ways, and then, you know, had some losses, then recovered. So again, there's like no optimization, so that's actually really incredible to start out with it being that good. But let's turn on the Exponent AI and just see if putting it at +1 or -1 gives me some different results. And you can look at the tool here, that higher AI functions, higher numbers here, tend to be better for lower time frames, but I'm just going to go ahead and do positive, and then I'll go to -1, which actually might be a little bit better. We'll see how this works. And sometimes you'll start with it as it is, and you won't even need to enable or work with the AI function. Okay, 134. I actually don't remember what it was before that, but it looks like it actually did worse here. Took some worse losses, so we're going to go with -1. This is just one way to optimize, and actually if I'm on like an hour time frame, I might not even work with that. I might only use that if I'm on like a 2-hour, 4-hour, 12-hour. It's the beauty of this tool. Yeah, you can see right here it's 165, so it's already doing a bit better. We could go down to like 0.9. I do find that, like, you'll find as you mess with it more, there's certain settings that generally work better for certain time frames, and so that's what this is for. You just go through and test them yourself. This will probably actually be a little bit worse. I think it was 165. We'll see. But as it goes there, yeah, it's a little bit worse. You could probably go down or up a little bit, maybe 1.1, 0.7, 0.8. Try a bunch of different things, but for right now, I'm just going to leave it at -1. Then the next section I kind of go to is the reliability AI section, and I'll go through here, and it gives you some tooltips. But basically, what this section does is looks at how respected the bands are for price action. You have your support. These are all your support settings on the left and your resistance settings on the right. So anything that I do in this section will be affecting the support bands. Update frequency is how often the bands update and look at just price interaction with the bands. I tend to keep it pretty low. I only let it go up to 5, because after that it's just kind of, you're playing too often, or you're playing with not enough information, and you probably won't get forward testing great results for testing. So we can change that. I've not messed with 1 hour time frame, messing with that right now. But if I was to be building a strategy, I would go through a few options. I'd go down to 1, look at the results, go up to 3, look at the results. 167. I think it's like, I kind of watch the drawdown and the percent and the profit factor all together and kind of see what I get. Sometimes this doesn't do doesn't change a whole lot, and that just means things are fairly consistent. And confirmation bars, I'll go in here, and yeah, so that's barely changing. The drawdown is a little bit better, so maybe I'll leave it there. Then I'll try a couple different confirmation bar settings. I'm not going to go through and fully optimize this. Maybe I'll do a video in the future where it'll takes me hours and hours, if not a day, to usually optimize a strategy. But if you're going to be trading a strategy long term, yeah, so that's way worse. So we're going to go back to 4. I guess we can go up to 5 and look. If you're going to be using a strategy for months and even years to come, I find it best to spend at least a day, if not 3 or 4 or 5 or a week, building the strategy and really, yeah, it looks like what it was before is better. So we'll put it back on that. 52. I don't actually remember. I'll just leave it here for now. I would mess with the resistance and see if I could optimize that a little bit more. The touch threshold is looking at how far away price action is and still consider it a touch. So right now, 0.95, that means price action has to be within 0.95% of the support band to be considered a touch of the bands and be actually changing the effects of what's happening with the bands. So I generally tend to keep it, fairly low, not going too high, because you want price to be actually interacting with the bands. On the resistance, because this is a long strategy, I tend to make that a little bit more lenient and a little bit higher. But you can go through and make it smaller or bigger, and just choose for yourself what settings you want to put that on. I would, while I'm doing this, I usually build on the index because it has so much backtest history. I would also at times go to like 20. Oh, this is perpetuals. Let me actually go to the index. I would go to like 2015 or somewhere like that, just to get some decent history. 2015 is pretty far in the past, and Bitcoin was trading very, very differently back then. Before that, it was trading like way more differently. So I wouldn't go back too much earlier than that to look at results, but that at least gives me, a little bit more data to work with. So I kind of tend to start there, and I'll hit generate report, and then I will often be changing little things and generating reports back and forth, and just seeing what in the near term makes an improvement and what in the long term makes an improvement, and basing my decisions off that. But this is not necessarily a strategy building tutorial video. It's more about the bands, so I'm going to keep going. Confidence level is looking at the accuracy percentage and adjusting the bands based on that. So if the bands tend to respect, or price action tends to respect the bands more often or less often, you can, sorry, I'm saying this weird. The general base confidence level that is started with is 66%. Now, the reason it's 66% is you want price action to break the bands at some point in time, because if it never breaks the bands, then you never have support flags and resistance flags, which means you never take trades. So you want the bands, the price action, to actually break the bands sometimes, but you don't want the price action to break the bands too often, because then you get false signals, and you don't want to do it too rarely, because then you don't get enough signals. I did allow to go down to like 50. I think it goes down -10 and up +10, and beyond that, it's pretty unuseful because it starts changing the bands way too much, and it goes way beyond what they were designed to do. But however, you do find, I find generally ±5, ±6 gives you some different results, and based on the chart you're looking at, the asset you're looking at, can give you some good results. So I would mess with the confidence level a little bit. Again, I usually try to stay within ±5 or 6. I built a short strategy the other day that I think the resistance confidence level is up like +6, and the support is up maybe 5 or something like that. I don't really remember, but that was the idea. Then if the effect decay rate is how gradually the bands adapt and learn from the interactions and all that stuff. So that is the general reliability AI section. Now, I do find this section makes slight changes. It's not going to be massive changes, and that's because generally, the bands tend to, even with this section off, tend to be fairly good. You can even build a strategy with that section off and just rely on other sections. So when I'm starting to build a strategy, I might start in all different areas in different ways, and you'll build different strategies. Depends on what you start with and how you start. That's, again, the beauty of the tool. But yeah, sometimes you might be better just to leave that off and work on other sections. Last thing to look at here is the band's playground, and that is the playground area that the bands will, and how strong, I guess the better way to put it is how strongly the bands will respond to the reliability AI section. And yeah, that basically speaks for itself. I found that these settings right here are generally the best settings, so I set them there as default. But there's been times when I've taken this down to even +4. I guess I should say up to +4, and I've taken this to, you know, something else like +6, or I've maybe taken this to -4 or 5, and this just to 4 or 5. Support bands, you know, I've gone up to like 0.4 and down to 0.25. Again, if you're not using this section, this part will not be functional. So that is just something to mess with if you are going through and taking a good day to build a strategy around an asset. The support and resistance layers, these have been a part of the bumper bands for as long as they've been around. These are just the 4 different layers, or depends on which version. If you're using the 1H, there's only 3 layers. If you're using other versions of the bumper bands, there's more or less layers. But this is basically just layering confirmations, looking at price action over the history and layering. Gosh, how is the best way to describe this? Layering resistance and support layers over each other, and informing the master support and resistance bands themselves. So I don't think I need to explain this too much, because there are other videos I talk about this a bit more. But the time factor is just the amount of windows of bars that it looks at. So again, generally these are set at a pretty good place, but I've had strategies where I've taken the time factor up to +9 or down to -7. Or up to +7. And so this is something you just want to slowly mess with, make adjustments, and see if it's better or worse. I can just try something like taking it up to +7 and taking the length down to 2 or down to 1, and just kind of seeing what happens with that. I have no idea if this is going to be better or worse, because I have not messed with this specific thing yet, and I don't actually remember on the 1 hour. So yeah, it looks like it's worse. We can take it down to like -4. Look at that. But generally when I'm building, I'll just slowly. I think it's more important to learn for yourself what general things work, and yeah, that's way worse. So we'll just go back to 0, it looks like. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it on length on 2 and go down negative to -2. But this is something you generally just want to work with yourself, and see how the bands and price and the strategy responds to it. Okay, yeah, so that's actually a better strategy already. So -2 with a length of 2. You might take the length up to 3, or you might change the type to SMA or EMA or WMA, and then you might change the offset a little bit. I will say I generally don't change the offset until maybe the very end, like one of the last things I do, because you don't want to be relying too much on offset to build a strategy. I want my strategy to be robust even without that, and I don't want to over optimize. So yeah, these windows here, they have tooltips. You're welcome to read those, but the best way to figure them out is just start messing with them and seeing what makes price respond, or the strategy respond better or worse. And then again, look at some deep back test history, and make sure, again, this is just the way I do it, but make sure it's useful and you're not just over optimizing for the present term. We don't have the future, but we do have the past, so we can go back some more bars and look at that. So these are the support and resistance layers. And the next thing that we come to here, as we are building our strategy and looking at the AI max version of the bands, is we have our midline and support test. Before I go into that, I need to take a sip and let my throat recover. All this talking is making my voice raw. I'm drinking some chaga mushroom tea. It's actually really awesome. I chug some of this usually before I have to do something that needs a lot of focus, like building a strategy, and just, I don't know, it really helps my mind focus in on what I'm doing. I think it's like lion's mane and whatever this stuff is, if anyone's interested. Super great. I don't even have a sponsorship with them. I just love the tea. So I'd say it's tea, it's coffee or tea or whatever you want to call it. All right, let's look at the midline test and support test. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn these on while I'm talking, just to see what happens. So the first thing we look at is obviously enable or disable, and what this is doing, you can see the bands just shifted there a little bit, is it's kind of like the AI section. I'm going to turn one off, and 168, so 180. So it doesn't look like these are being helpful currently, but what it's doing is looking at more current price action and how it's responded to. That's about the same. How it's responded and worked with testing recent price action and adjusting from there. So let me find an example. When we have our support test, it means that price has to... Okay, so price has to, on the previous bar before entry, price has to have tested the bands by this much distance. And obviously it tested and broke through, but it basically offsets that price and makes sure that price really strongly broke through the bands. This helps you maybe avoid some barely, where it barely breaks the bands. It also does it's a little bit more complicated than that. So I can't get into it too much because I don't even know how to explain it. But basically that's the simple definition or explanation is it's looking at midline and support tests. So it has to test the midline, and then it also has to test support on previous bars. And this sometimes gets rid of like false signals or signals that you might barely break the bands, and then the next trade will break them a lot more. I don't know if I can find a place where it does that. Maybe, well, even here is one. So I could, if I wanted to get rid of maybe this one, I could do a bigger offset on the support, and so it wouldn't count this, and it would count this. So that way you get in a little bit better entry point. And the midline, the same kind of thing. So it's kind of self-explanatory. You can read the whole thing here, and I do have a lot of options here for price test source to look at if you want to make it choose and use. Let's see which one. I don't think I want to use that one. I'm going to do a combination of open and low. We'll see. This is going to be a lot less, so that means it has to open at the band. It means it has to open like, so this one probably won't trigger anymore. I don't think. Oh, it still will, I guess. Oh, okay. I guess price did. That's actually very interesting. So look at that. All right, the next thing that we're going to look at is the support and resistance validation. After that brief intermission of taking a drink. So what we're doing here is, it kind of is a bit self-explanatory, but it requires price to have tested the bands in a certain way. Otherwise, the bands get offset a bit. So your offset is kind of right here. And let me just go ahead and turn this on. You'll see the bands totally get offset where it's false. So you saw the bands move a little bit. So when this condition is not met, the bands get offset, and you have your price source here. So you can choose to be looking at the lows. You can be, which is the wicks. You can choose to look at close or open, or a combination of those. So LCC means it's low, low, and close, which means those three divided by 3. So it'll take the low price, and the closing price, multiply or divide by 3, and that will be the average, basically the average of those 3, if that makes sense. If you want to get way fewer entries, you could turn it on. You can make it way harder to make the bands, you can offset the bands a lot if these conditions are not met, which means, let's look at open and low, which means you'll average the price of open and low, and then if those two conditions, if that average of that price is not met by the bands, it will offset. As you can see, the bands kind of offset even more. I just kind of want to see, I think it was I forgot what it was 187 maybe? No, 167. Okay, so that did make, it did improve the total profit and loss. It improved the drawdown, and then you can look at trigger distance and like make it stronger or weaker, and then you can look at offset, how much it offsets the bands to make it stronger or weaker. Let me just kind of see what this does. 162. So yeah, it was better at 0.08. I do find that somewhere around here is a decent starting spot, but yeah, feel free to mess with it and make it your own. You can even put this one on open low, which again is just going to make less signals. It's going to offset the bands more. We'll kind of see what the results are here. 183. So yeah, a little bit better. If I was going through and actually building the strategy, I would try a few other options in here and a few other options with trigger distance and support offset. And this isn't usually, I don't like starting with this. You kind of want to get all of your support and resistance layers and some of this stuff kind of worked out. And then I'll go to this. This is why it's down here further. Resistance validation, if you want to exit less, maybe you want to do less of a scalp trade and more of a trending kind of trade, you can choose to offset the resistance band, and it will make it usually, yeah, you can see it'll barely, sorry, not barely, it will rarely exit. So you'll get a lot less trades. Your drawdown went up because that means there's, you know, some more losing trades in there, all that kind of stuff. But you know, maybe you could put this at instead of high, you could put it at open high, or I don't know. I haven't really messed with this for the resistance on a 1 hour a lot, so I don't know what settings would be better or worse. But yeah, again, it's just something to optimize a little bit better. Looks like that made it worse. A lot of times I actually don't on my scalping strategies, I don't even have this enabled because I want trades to be able to get out as often as possible, again, because it's a scalp and you want to be able to exit. Maybe if you're trying to build a trending strategy with these, you can turn that on a little bit more, or for a different asset, or if you're building a short and you want it to enter trades less often, say you're entering the trades on a resistance flag up here. You want less, you know, flags to form, so you can do that. The last thing to look at is proximity AI, which just this gets again a little bit more into the machine learning side of it, and I find that I actually don't use this. I've only built a few strategies with this so far because it's a new tool. I have not used it very often recently, but you know, it does now give me a little bit more trades, and it might be helpful, might not. Proximity AI does apply to both. I may come up with an update here soon where I make the proximity only apply to support or resistance, and you can choose. Actually, that will probably be the next update I release. But yeah, it's just I don't really want to explain this one. You can look at the tooltip there. It kind of just looks at general proximity to the bands over time and averages those out. You can see the bands got really a lot more smooth here. That's what that does. Mess around with it, and yeah, I'm kind of ready to move on from here. But I often don't even use this on my strategies because I find that it sometimes can be a little bit less predictable. Again, maybe this is just because I haven't built a whole lot of strategies with these yet in this tool yet. So take it or leave it. But that's kind of just a way to, I guess, average out the effects of this a little bit more over time. Okay, so we turned on the signal flags here because that's what we're using to trade. If you don't want the signal flags and you just want to choose to trade, say you want to, when price closes less than the support band and greater than the resistance band, you say we're doing long, we can say enter and exit here. So it goes long when it closes less than the support, and it closes the trade when it exits the trade when it's above the resistance band. And you don't even want to mess with the flags. You can do that as well. But yeah, I usually, because now I have all these other tools built in, I usually trade off of the flags themselves because it's the same thing with the tools added. Okay, I'm gonna take another break. This is a long video. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and I'm also going to disable this section here because we don't really need it. We're trading off the flags currently. All right. The other thing that would be probably helpful to do if you want your strategy to be looking a little bit better off the bat is to have some risk enabled. I don't even know what to put that on, but yeah, it would be helpful to turn on risk and maybe even take out Sundays. I usually do that. Oh, it's interesting. Risk made it worse. I probably should worse so far. I should probably optimize that a little bit. Let's see. Usually I start with some risk enabled. Let me try this because I have not messed with this so far. I don't actually know what numbers would be good here. Actually, maybe going lower there would be helpful. We'll see. But it is helpful if I'm building the strategy. I don't want to start with no risk at all on. Yeah, there we go. That's a lot better. Okay, so now we have a little bit of risk enabled, max stop loss of 3.1. You usually want to build a strategy before you get way too in depth on the strategy with a little bit of risk enabled. Otherwise, you'll build a strategy that needs crazy volatility to be successful, and unless you have the stomach to sit through that volatility, it will be pretty painful. And I find that if I optimize my strategy to the extreme before I turn risk on, once I turn risk on, I will have to go back and re-optimize my strategy to work with the risk enabled. So again, to each his own. If you're willing to deal with crazy volatility, you can leave risk off completely and risk liquidating your account, but not my style of trading. Okay, so now we have some risk enabled, which means if it closes with a 3.1 over 3.1 loss, I'm going to restate that. If price action goes over a 3.1 loss at the close of the candle, price will exit, or the strategy will exit. So we have at least a little bit of risk enabled. Now we're going to look at our vitality signals. This is looking at the volatility of the price action dependent on the bands. So it kind of takes what's going on with price action within the bands, what it considers volatile or not volatile, and then you can choose your threshold. I actually will probably make this just an open box where you can type in any. I generally, though, find that somewhere between 20 and 32 is generally a good place to start if you're going to filter flags with the vitality section. Okay, so let me explain this a little bit better. When you enable this, the flags will not populate unless the vitality is over this threshold. So the bands are looking at price action, and you can see strategy just automatically got way better there because it is producing less flags now, support flags specifically, based on our level of 27. We could put it at 24, kind of watch 216, see if it's better or worse, and we can change the length and the look back based on the bands and the what's it called? How far apart the bands are, all that stuff, because of volatility. And let's see, I think that got worse, right? 216, yeah, a little bit worse. So we'll go up to 29 and see. But yeah, I would recommend just kind of messing with this. And then the signal memory is basically how long this remains true. So if you put it on 0, yeah, so I got a little bit better there even. If you put it on 0, that means it's only true for that one bar. If you put it on 1, that means it's valid for 1 extra bar. And then I will, once we see what that did, 222, I think that got better. I actually don't remember. It looks like the strategy is slowly and surely getting a little bit better. Now, this is not a strategy yet that I would want to trade because it has so long of periods where it just goes sideways, down, and then up. I think we could, if we really went through and optimized all of these sections here a little bit more, we could get much better results. But again, this is kind of just where I'm starting to give you a little bit of description of what does what. Okay, so now we turn the vitality up to 29. You can maybe put this, I would usually try like 13. I'd try odd numbers just between 11 and 21. Sometimes going as low as 9. And then vitality look back, I'll just try like 100, 150, 200, 250. I try not to over-optimize these too much and kind of just find, yeah, so that actually made it worse. Maybe we'll go up to 19, who knows. Okay, the last thing to look at is the strength. So what this does is, if price closes a very strong close under the bands, it will ignore the settings here and still print a signal. So this is helpful if you're wanting to kind of trust the bands are over time getting price action pretty correct. And you can see it kind of is. So like price action generally does not close too far below the bands. Right here, it did close a little bit further below the bands. I'm not seeing very many other places where it closes strongly below the bands. So that means that maybe I want to make a strategy where I think that a strong close below the bands is more of a what you consider a deviation from price, and it will bounce back. And so then I can say, hey, I want to ignore all of these sections and still enter a trade if it closes a small amount to a big amount below the bands. Now this isn't necessarily a percentage. It's kind of based on AI a little bit and machine learning. It's based on past history. So this is basically small to large. Small just means it's less of a strong close. Large means it needs to be a really strong close below the band. Let's put this at 0.75 and see if it changes anything. Sometimes it doesn't change it too much, because in this occasion it looks like price is just generally being respected pretty well by the bands, and we actually probably want it actually made it worse. Let me see. So we went from let me look at the bypassed 906 to 998. Yeah. So we're getting a lot more closes. Okay. So there are times where this is becoming true. So maybe we want to put it a little bit higher because we want to filter out even more trades than that. Bypassed filters out any closes. It doesn't matter. It goes it has to have the vitality section be true, and large means I think I explained this a minute ago. Okay, so that's even worse. This, oops, I put it back at default. Oh no, that's actually doesn't exist. Okay, I was getting very man, my mind. Okay, so we're going to look at putting this a little bit higher just to see if maybe we'll put it large. So we have 998 trades right now, and it's worse. So we'll say we need a really strong close to enter a trade. And sometimes it's better on bypass, and that's why it's there. 216, I don't remember actually what it was on bypass. 229. Okay, so even with the large, it's still not better. This actually, if you have this on and then go through and change the settings, you might be able to find. It kind of depends on which order you go in as to how you optimize it. So if you start with this on and optimize this, you might get better results than if you start with this. What I was saying. Yeah, if you start with this section on and then go through and optimize, you would get different results as if you started with this off, optimized, and then turn this on. That's what I'm trying to say. Hopefully that makes sense. But it really matters the order of operation of how you build your strategy, the results you get. And sometimes this is why I build a lot of different strategies and take weeks of time to build them in different orders and try different things, because eventually you'll come on the best order of operations, and it's just a really good strategy. But it's probably not going to be the case where the first strategy you build happens to be the ultimate best strategy you'll ever will build. This is just not reality with anything that we do in life. So I find that for users that generally spend time learning this tool, over time you will get some pretty incredible results, but you have to have the patience and just dedication to stick through all of this. Okay, I think I've hopefully explained that pretty well. The second thing is, if you want the resistance flags to have this same vitality idea to print a resistance flag, you can turn that on. Again, if I'm building a long strategy, I generally want more resistance flags to print. If I'm building a long scalping strategy, maybe you're trying to do more of a trending strategy, so you have a reason to put it on, and you want you want to filter out more and have less trades, have trades exit less often. You're welcome to do that and try it out. Actually, it did make the results a little bit better there. I think it did. Let me make sure. 236. Yeah, it made the results a little bit better. Obviously, less trades because you're going you're exiting trades less often. You could probably optimize this. Maybe you put it on low so it's has more trades. The lower you go, the more exits it'll have. The higher you go, the less exits it'll have. And then obviously can still use all of this stuff there. Yeah, so it looks like low was actually not better. Default was better. Maybe we go to very high, and we're building a little bit more of a kind of trending strategy, and we want volatility to be super high in order to exit. That looks like 251. I don't remember, honestly. I'm not really paying attention because I'm working more. Yeah, okay, so that's even better. Our profit factor goes up, and yeah, we're building a little bit more of a trending strategy now. All right, we're going to take a quick second to look at the bumper bands light version before I go on further, because I realized that I've not explained the difference or just some of the nuances of the light version versus the max version. So the main difference is the light version is for those who want to build much faster, don't care about all the nitty-gritty details and optimizing it quite as much. They're mostly the most important parts of the indicator are still available to adjust, but they're in drop-down menus, which means that you have less options. Mostly like the most important options are available, and but you can't dial it in quite as much, which hopefully for new users will keep you from over optimizing, and kind of for more advanced users that kind of want to see generally my personal preferences for different settings, they can look at them. So I'll give you an example here. For the support and resistance band playground section, you can see that these are set to 0, negative 0.05, negative 0.25. So it's not very, those are still small changes, but those are generally the most useful. Actually, on this one specific setting, I generally leave it at neutral and don't ever even change it. But those, if you are to change it, those would be what I would try first. For this, wide versus very wide. So the default was like 0.32, I think. But on this is for SUI instead of Bitcoin. I put this one on very wide because it needed to be a bit higher, and I don't care about dialing into like 0.43 or 0.44. Again, all this stuff can be over optimized, and so I wanted to give users just some general good settings to start with, and you don't have to go through and spend just a bunch of extra time trying to change it by 0.01 at a time. It's like these settings right here generally tend to be helpful and useful, yeah, so that's the main differences. There's the validation section. There's about the same amount of options here, but these are set instead of being an empty box that you can put any setting in. These are set again to the most useful, and it goes up to 0.65, which is probably higher than you'll ever need. But yeah, those are there, and the section following that wasn't even needed because it really, these two things are the most needed to optimize that third section that was over here. The offset section, is much less. Let's see, I'm going to go back here. Is much less important, and I found that very minimal in the difference that it makes in general. But the last thing to look at here before I go back to the max version is the vitality and trend direction section, the flag section. So instead of having two separate sides for support and resistance, it has one. Has one that you can choose to apply support, resistance, or to both. And this is because I found if I'm generally doing a flyover, wanting to build a strategy really fast, I'm going to only use the filters for the side of the strategy that I'm building. So if I'm building a long strategy, I want to filter out entry flags or support flags. And so I'm going to apply these filters to those support flags so I have less entries that are more optimal. If I'm building a short strategy, I will do resistance flags, and so I only optimize the resistance flags. And I found that it's a lot more minimal, or maybe more dangerous, I guess, to apply these to the opposite side, because again, I personally want to get out of trades because that means less risk. The longer that you're in a trade, the more risk is involved, unless you have a tight stop loss. And yeah, I'll leave it off there. I will say that this is a little trick, and this may be for those that are watching this video. If you apply the trend direction to support and resistance, you're going to take a big step up in your total profit, I'm pretty sure. So we're at 135 now, and your profit factor should go up. But again, you're going to take on a little bit more risk because it didn't like that. I'm going to have to reset it here. You're taking on more risk because you're exiting trades less often. But let's go ahead and let that populate. Yeah, so it went up to 161. You can see that profit factor is great. The drawdown, I think the drawdown's actually maybe a little bit worse, but the number of trades is less, but it's, a really great looking chart if you're willing to take on a little bit of extra risk of being in trades longer. So you could see that it would have exited the trade here, 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 but it didn't exit those until way over here. So you're getting, I guess that would have been a nice little winning trade right there, but at the same time, this trade over here could have exited out there, but didn't, and actually ended up being a losing trade. So this is the drawback. It's actually kind of funny. I guess you did have a little bit more of a gain on this trade than you did have a loss on that trade. So maybe over time it does pay off, but you're going to have to go through a bit more volatility, and that would have been a nice trade to win. But here we are. Okay, so jumping back, I guess the last thing to look at here on the light version is you have your short-term and your long-term trend. So that is different than the max version. The max version just has the short-term trend, but you can apply it separately and you can have separate settings for support and resistance, which is probably will allow you to optimize it a little bit more. But because I didn't have both, I went ahead and added a second trend filter, and it makes it again for beginners. These settings that these are both on are generally kind of good places to start, but you can enable or disable those. And yeah, it's basically looking at a few different things. I'm not going to get into the depth details of those right now. Maybe I'll come back at the end of the video and get into the details of that, but I kind of wanted to point this out before we got too far. Okay, going back to the light version, or the max version, my apologies. We're looking at the trending support section, and this is, again, filtering out flags and what flags are allowed to populate. So let me kind of get this back in focus here. And the first thing we're going to do is enable this. So we're going to have less entry signals populate and hope that it improves our strategy a little bit. Now, I did change this to 13 and 500. The default is like 13 and 300, but I knew 500 would be a little bit better on the strategy because I actually did a quick test on that. It's not that much different, though. So you can see our total profit actually didn't change that much, but our drawdown is much better. And you can see over here, it's slowly making gains over time, which is a lot more what we want to see on a strategy. Less, big hits taken, less trades again, but bigger profit factor, which is kind of the direction that we're wanting to go. So that's a good starting place. If you are optimizing, feel free to go in and obviously work that out a lot more. So trend direction. So this is important to note. And sometimes you can build just as good of a strategy on contracting versus expanding. However, if I'm building, not trending, if I'm building, what am I talking about? If I'm building scalping strategies, I generally want the trend direction to be contracting because I want things to be smoothing out. I don't want volatility and the trend to be expanding. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of times when the trend is expanding, you've kind of missed the trade. And if you enter a trade after it's already expanding, you're probably going to enter it when there's going to be a pullback. This isn't always the case, and sometimes you can enter great trades on pullbacks in a larger trend. And so you're welcome to try expanding if that's what you are looking for. And you can try the length and look back, changing all of those to see if you can find some better settings. I'll go ahead and try it just to see on this 1 hour, see what happens. We're looking at 251 and we're gonna see what happens to this. But it's a nice little nuance to be able to change between. And yeah, you can see the results got way worse. So it's probably good that we are, for this kind of scalping strategy that we're building, we're doing contracting. Now you might be able to, if you're looking maybe at a shorter trend or longer trend, depends on what you put in here, you might be able to make expanding work as good or even better. So that's something that users can go in and make their choice on. And let's go ahead and put it on for the resistance flag. Kind of like I pointed out, this is something that is based on your preference of trading. And I'm going to see if this makes it better or worse. Yeah, it's actually made it worse over time. So maybe we'll put that on expanding, and just to try it out and see. If you do have this on, I would probably mess with the settings a little bit more and optimize those. And I'm just going to, before I go on, I'm going to see if this... 276, so it did make it, actually did make it a bit better. So yeah, that might be something that's worth noting. It did, however, make a bit more worse pullbacks over here and during the bear market period. So maybe you could optimize this a little bit more by changing the length and look back. I'm gonna just go ahead and leave that on for now. Okay, the next thing to look at is trending mode. The smart hybrid is the default right now. Maybe I'll make the default bypass. I probably actually should do that. But bypass means that it's not going to change between different modes. One is probability based and one is dynamic threshold based. Those are just the internals, the internal math and technology that's happening. It's just smart hybrid is choosing between these two modes over time, or bypass over time, depending on the market conditions. And I don't have enough experience with building to know, exactly what to recommend. And I guess I shouldn't recommend anything as of now. This is for users to decide what they want to use. I usually go with bypass or smart hybrid, but you can absolutely try any of those. These are kind of minimal differences. When you try them out, you'll kind of see. But I'm going to start with it. Let's go ahead and go to bypass just to see. We're at 276 to see if it makes it better or worse. While it's doing that, I'm going to look at volatile strength and calm sensitivity. Something to note is these names might change. They're different. Let's see, 276. I think that's better, right? No, it's exactly the same. That's actually really interesting. Huh. That is very interesting that is not changing. Let me turn this on bypass. So I guess we probably have filtered out enough trades by now that it. I actually have to check on that because that's 276. That's weird. That's not actually changing. Oh, this is why. Okay, I have this bypassed. My bad. So if you want this to actually be in effect, you have to unbypass those, which is a bit of a nuance that's a bit different on the light version. The light version has a bypass within the scaling section. It's built in because it's a drop down, and scaling factor is on bypass now. This one, the scaling factor is separate. Actually, that is weird. It looks like I have to go in and make a few tweaks here because this section actually is not working like it is supposed to. Huh. Okay, well, unfortunately, I'm already making this video. An update that I recently did must have changed that. Basically, quick explanation. I already explained that. It's kind of looking at different kinds of trends. The bypasses this section. Support scaling. Support scaling is changing when it. Another thing to note is every once in a while, you'll see this kind of crazy spike up happen in the bands, and that's just when it's conglomerating all the data. Every once in a while it'll do that. So randomly happens. Okay. I got distracted there. The scaling part of this changes how it looks and what it looks for the different kinds of trends settings here. So the scaling, the lower you go, will change how often it looks for probability, and the higher you go is how often it looks for dynamic. I honestly tend to leave these bypassed and these bypassed. It gets very complicated. If you want to, mess with leaving them all a part of it and not bypassed, you're welcome to. But again, when I'm building a strategy, I'm trying to find a few areas to optimize and not over optimize. So maybe if I haven't overly optimized other settings in here, I will go ahead and make this a little bit more optimized. But if you spend like way too long optimizing every little thing to the nth degree, you probably will end up making a strategy that's over optimized. So for now, I'm just going to leave this bypassed. Volatile strength. Let me make sure actually this section works here. I'm going to put this at point like 2 and 0.5 or something, and make sure this is working like it's supposed to. But basically, the volatile strength is how strong a signal has to be considered contracting or expanding. Okay, did that 229? Let me see. Yeah, okay, that did. That did adjust it. So yeah, this is kind of like the strength, and I do note this, I think, in the... let's see, make sure maybe I didn't note it in there. Okay, whether I did note it in there or not. So volatile strength, if you don't have the calm sensitivity below 1, if you go above 1 with the volatile strength, I think it's above 1, maybe it's below, it won't actually make any difference. So I'm pretty sure it's above. Let me see, 0.5. Let's just try this out. 276. But yeah, so this is looking at volatility versus calm. So basically what happens is if you go above 1, it starts going into the calm setting. Yeah, 276 and 19. Oh wait, that's actually below. So it's inverse. Yeah, okay, that's right. I think, so if you go below 1, let me actually make sure these are bugs I'm working out in the moment, y'all. 276 and 19. Okay, that is right. I was explaining it differently. If you go into, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so if you go lower, the lower volatility means it's more calm. So if you go below 1, you're basically getting into what would be considered calm anyway. So basically, yeah, if I go below 1, it's not going to do any differently unless I go below with calm as well. I think that's the case. Let me see. So 0.5, 232. Yeah, users should mess with this and just kind of see. But yeah, if you're messing with this and see that it's not having any effect, it's probably because it's going into the column. Let's see, 1.54, 232. Yeah, okay. So you can make it. You can say less calm and less volatile. So that will basically be filtering out more and more trades. Hopefully this is making sense. My mind is pretty mushy after this long of a video. But volatile strength, to sum this up, volatile strength is saying that less than 1 means the market, it's going into calm. Over 1 means that the market is getting more and more volatile, which means you'll be considering more and more trades a possibility. Calm sensitivity, if you're going below 1, means that less and less is what it's considering calm. Above, it's more. Okay. Hopefully that all makes sense. I do find that sometimes going to like medium, like 0.5 here and 0.5 here, filters out some good, filters out trades a lot more. Again, we only have 500 trades right now, and this is the full, I have the ultimate plan, so I have tons of bars. I think this is going back like 4 years or maybe 5 years. So 500 trades is not a whole lot. I would consider that mid to low. So I don't want to filter out too many more trades right now. Okay, I think I explained all that. Hopefully y'all got that pretty well. And the last thing we're going to look at is smoothing and support smoothing, resistance smoothing, and offset. So smoothing, as of right now, I have only 500 trades. Maybe I want to get more trades, so I'll take the smoothing up, which means that it takes, well, it's funny because this is actually already pretty smooth because of other settings I did in there. we'll see what happens. This will probably make more trades. Yeah, this does make a lot more trades. Okay, so what this smoothing does is automatically makes trades happen more often. So maybe I want to turn the smoothing up, and then I want to go back through here and optimize so less trades happen here. That's kind of a way to optimize and make the strategy your own. Or maybe I've over-optimized my, I've over-optimized and I have very few exit signals, so I want to make more exit signals. So making the smoothing of the band go up will actually create more exit signals because the bands won't respond as fast to price action. Okay, and the last thing is offset. If you want to offset the bands a little bit, I rarely mess with this because once we've gone through all this other optimization, like we probably don't need to over optimize setting the support and the resistance bands a little bit higher, a little bit lower. But who knows, maybe, putting it 0.05 or 0.1 might help you out a little bit there if you want to get a few less trades. So that's kind of self-explanatory. The last section is gradient coloring. So if you want to make the bands load a little bit faster, I would turn that off, and it'll just be your normal green and red bands. And if I'm creating an alert, if say I've built my strategy and I go over here and I say add an alert, I'm going to want to add an alert after the band when I turn that off, just to make sure the bands are not looking at coloring, because coloring doesn't matter when you're making alert. Then after you make the alert, you can always turn the coloring back on if you like that. And that won't, once the alert is created, it's not looking at it. And even if you turn it back on, the alert is working off of the previous built bands. Okay, so here we go. There is a general run through of the BB30 AI. Man, there's just so many, different variations of strategies you can make with these tools and the bands now. It's pretty awesome. I'll be around the Discord, but just like I was saying earlier, take time to actually interact with the bands, use them for a while, use them with the skeleton key. Or if you want to trade them manually by hand, you're welcome just to do that, because now you got entry and exit flags or support and resistance flags, so you can trade it by hand. But I do recommend this incredible trading tool if you have not used it. It's going to be linked here in the video below and in my Discord. Okay, I'm going to leave the video off here. Hopefully that was helpful for your building purposes and understanding purposes of these new bands. Watch, there's going to be a lot of new stuff coming here over the next few months. I'm going to make the BB1H and all the other versions of the bumper bands. I'm going to incorporate this AI and all these tools with them. But again, it's going to take time, because it takes a lot of building and effort on my part to make sure everything is debugged and working well. So, all right, y'all. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you in the next video.